question why is often going to put people on the defense immediately because it feels like an accusation. It feels like I have to defend my position. Even so, again, it depends on how you deliver it, what the intention is. So one way to avoid or kind of circumnavigate that defensiveness immediately is to ask what and how questions. By asking what or how, we are giving them an opportunity to create agency for themselves. And that's something that is going to be applicable in every aspect of their life where they don't feel like they have power or control.
Hey, you found Ways We Learn, an investigation of how learning happens across all ages and modalities. Let's go learn something. Hi, and welcome back to Ways We Learn. I'm Sean, and I'm here with Joe. And today we'll be talking about executive coaching, and in particular, how to develop intentional and conscious leadership through that coaching. And our guest says that that's partly by learning to ask powerful questions. And so today she's going to help us learn what that means. Merritt Minnemayer is on a mission to eradicate executive mediocrity. She's the founder and CEO of Master of One Coaching, employs 25 years of experience and her entrepreneurial DNA to help founders, leaders, and creatives exceed all expectations, including their own. Merritt is a professional certified coach, a recovering actor, and an international speaker. Having rebuilt her life after widowhood at 35, Merritt believes that conscious leaders are the number one solution in creating and sustaining a successful future, and that anything is possible when powerful people do right by themselves, those whom they serve, the planet, and one another. So, Merritt, thank you for joining us on Ways We Learn, and welcome.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with just some of your background. I know that you have a background in theater. The recovering actor was in quotes. And so tell us where you came from and how you got to where you are.
We saw The Nutcracker when I was very little, and I came home, as great parents do. They encouraged me to express myself, and they would clap for me and cheer for me. And I came home from The Nutcracker, and I would perform the ballet in my little 3-year-old way, holding my nutcracker and looking at it longingly, and they would clap and hooray, and therefore boosted my ego enough to make me think that I had some sort of future as a performer, and caught that bug early. And I pursued that from that point forward through dance class and gymnastics, and later on voice lessons and piano, and then acting camps and classes, and eventually finding my way through community theater, high school theater, and then getting my degree at NYU in acting. And when I came out of that program at the right young age of 20, I realized that I had really backed myself into a corner, and that I had given myself limited opportunities to fully express who I wanted to be, because I identified so strongly with being a performer that I didn't actually want to explore anything else. And it was pretty terrifying, actually, because I realized that it wasn't the life that I really wanted, but I didn't know how to do anything else. And in that industry, they often say, actually, a mentor say to me, don't do this unless you have to. And I heard that in a different way than he intended. What he intended for us to hear when he said that was, do it because you love it, do it because you're passionate about it, do it because it inspires you and it makes you feel alive. And what I heard was, well, I don't have any of the skills, so I guess I'm stuck doing this thing that I don't really feel that great about for myself. But at any rate, so I stuck it out for a while, and eventually burned out pretty hard, and had to learn how to transfer my skills into other areas that felt more meaningful to me, and in ways that really used my gifts and spoke to my passions. And oddly enough, that led me to leadership development. So that it might seem like a weird leap to make, but the path was winding enough and nuanced enough that it makes total sense to me.
And along the way, I know you received a master's in, you've said it's essentially social justice. It's called humanistic multicultural education.
Yes.
And so I'm sure that way of thinking, if not the specifics of coaching, go into the way that you think about working with people as well.
Definitely. So one of the stops along that winding road was working for several organizations that provided DEI facilitation services for leaders. and workshops and things like that. And so that really opened my eyes and ignited a fire in me for social justice. I mean, it started earlier than that. I went to several schools that were very service oriented and focused. And when I started doing that work in earnest, it really opened my eyes to the opportunities that I had to have an impact in my immediate communities. And it also opened my heart to ask myself some questions about what I could do in the world that would help bring people closer together, to build more bridges, to deepen connections, to shed some light in dark corners where people are fearful or hesitant or needing to have courage about understanding and compassion. And those are all really big and lofty goals, and I'm only one person, but along those lines, it also led me to all three of my children are adopted, but specifically along that journey, when I was working as the DEI facilitator, I made some amazing connections, and one of them was the executive director of an adoption and foster care agency, and she was the one that led me to two of my children. So it's been it's a very personal journey as well as a professional one.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And so you became interested in coaching, you said, soon after coming out of your theater background, out of your performance, out of doing the theater. You got interested in that field then and sort of went in that direction. So you've been doing this for a while now.
Yeah, I didn't know it was coaching at the time. And of course, artists, any performing artist, and also just like athletes, we know coaching very well. I mean, there is no time when a professional performer isn't in some sort of coaching. It's not something that you can ever stop doing as a vocalist, as an actor, whether it's, auditioning coach or a singing coach or dance coach, whatever it is. So that's just something as a way of life. You're constantly fine tuning, improving, learning, stretching yourself. And then when I realized that I wanted to do something different than perform myself, initially that led me to arts education. And that's really where that leadership development and coaching door was opened, though I didn't have the language for it at the time. But I started to see how arts mechanisms would provide opportunities for people to be inspired and to use to learn what their voice is, learn how to express themselves and learn how to have an impact in the world around them. And that became something that was really powerful for me to witness. And I felt a deep sense of honor and responsibility around that. So that led me then into education, more traditional education, where I worked with teenagers and specifically on leadership development.
Got it.
And then from there, the DEI. And so it became this leadership development seed that was planted early on in the performing, but actually has bloomed into this whole other weird career that I have.
When you see good coaching, right, and you've seen it both as a receiver of it, of course, in previous lives, and now as a giver of it, how do you describe what good coaching looks like?
Mm-hmm.
That's a great question. It's actually pretty simple.
Great answer.
And and I wouldn't say it's easy necessarily, but it's simple. And the reason that I make that distinction is because I actually look back at my acting training and realize that so much of my acting training and my directing training lends itself to great coaching, because it's primarily about presence, being fully present with somebody and learning how to listen to what they're telling you, both with their words and actually more importantly with the way in which they say things and with their body, what they're communicating. And so once one learns how to listen deeply and to be fully present, to really hold space for another person in their searching, in their mess, in their joy, most of that coaching is about creating the space, creating the opportunity for the other person to draw their own insights, make their own connections so that they can have their growth moments that are fully theirs. And we tend not to do that as humans unless we have some place to share things, whether it's through writing or through relationship or both. And often even through stories. right? So again, back to the performing the piece of it. So the simplicity of it is presence, listening, and then asking some powerful questions.
It's very psychologically minded. I love that my wife is a psychologist, and so that's a very similar sort of way of thinking about it. That it's being present, it's really listening, and it's helping people to make the connections that are powerful for themselves, as opposed to saying, well, this is what you should do or something.
Correct.
But that's the experience that I've had both in therapy and in coaching, that the big breakthroughs are not the ones when someone tells me what I should be thinking or doing. It's when they help me see it. And I see it so clearly because I'm working this through with someone who's so present. So I love how you explained that.
And oftentimes they help you see it just by reflecting back to you what you're saying. Or the gaps in your logic, right? So, well, if I want this and I believe that, it's hard to achieve what you want if you believe this. So let's explore that. What's the gap there? It's what you're saying also speaks to this idea of powerful questions, because when we talk at somebody, the natural instinct of the receiver of being talked at is defensiveness.
Yeah.
Unless we are fully aware of our own receiving of it, and we're like, okay, I can tell myself I'm going to be open to this and I want to hear the feedback. If we're not fully present to that in ourselves, then we are going to be defensive. And that's not a way to learn, right? We just have to, it's like the parent rolling, or the kid rolling their eyes at their parent. We're like, I don't know, lecture number 47, right? Here we go again.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah.
Yeah. And Joe, I'm thinking about some of the stuff that we talked about back at Flatiron about, learning under stress and the just how it shuts down the ability to process or think creatively. And I loved when we were there that you drew a really important distinction between stress and pressure, that there's pressure can be a motivator. Stress, like fight or flight, can shut you down.
Yeah. Stress and pressure, and also nervousness and excitement, also the same physiological experience. It's just about context and what we think about it, what we believe about it.
How do you think about teaching people how to be good coaches? Because like one thing I've always struggled with when we were running Flatiron School is our job was to teach teachers, right? And there was a lot of like, I know it's good when I see it, right? But I can't like articulate why that needs to be better. How do you think about, and I imagine as an executive coach, you're teaching people how to be managers, how to run their teams, how to run their organizations. How do you think about kind of like teaching and evaluating the ability to be a good coach to their team members?
Right. I'm not just teaching people. Well, first of all, I don't think I'm qualified to teach somebody how to be a good manager. What I am qualified to do is to teach somebody how to lead by coaching. So, I mean, there's certain tools and practices and processes that we can put into place for management, right? If we're looking at, how do I keep somebody accountable? What is the structure I want to use? What responsibility do I have? Does this person have? We can talk about ways to do that. Ultimately, all of that, it has to be nuanced, and it has to be about the people in front of you, because though there are some things that are true about groups, how groups operate, and there are some things that are true about different personality types, ultimately, it's going to only make sense in the same way that if you talk at somebody and they don't want to hear you, if you come in and say, this is the way you're going to manage, it's not going to work, because it's not nuanced. It's not in context of their life and stride with their workday and stride with the community they're developing on their team. So this idea of powerful questions, that's really where I start with a lot of these, when I'm coaching people who are learning how to lead by coaching. It's learning how to be present, how to listen, and ask those powerful questions, and then really be attentive to their answers.
Yeah. I feel like that teaching that last part is the hardest thing.
It's super hard.
Like actually, okay,
like, well,
ask a great question of freaking listen.
Right. Right. I asked a great question. What was wrong with that? Yeah. Well, then you rolled your eyes when they gave you the answer. Okay. Well, right. Maybe that's not an effective way to receive it. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So I'm dying to get into the powerful question thing, but I want to back up more before we do that and just talk about the process that you've had as you've built your coaching business. Because you've been doing this, like we said, for a while. And the business is called, I mentioned this before, but it's called Master of One Coaching. We'll put a link in the episode notes so people can check it out. But when did you said you kind of were surprised to come into this, I think you called this odd business of mine or something like that you said, this strange career.
Weird. It's a strange little weird career that I have, yeah.
Strange, weird career. When you've been doing Master of One Coaching for a while, and what has that experience been like, really building an intentional business around this, and what have your learnings been around that?
Yeah, well, intentional business is the key there, the word intention. My grandfather taught me a long time ago. He was an entrepreneur, and I learned a lot from growing up in an entrepreneurial family, both on with my parents and then also my grandfather. And he always preached that success is preparation plus opportunity. So I was tuned into where would the opportunities be for me to grow and learn and succeed. And it took me a long time to really find this strange little career that I have. And I call it strange because it is. I do make my living by asking questions. That's what I do. And it seems so simple, but it's like I said, it's not easy. So when if I'll go back a little bit, I had a personal, like you mentioned that I was a widow, and when I was 35 years old, my husband passed away, and I had to rebuild my life. And it took me a long time to figure out exactly how to do that. What did I want it to look? I had kind of had a do-over, right? Like I checked all these boxes, and I had to restructure, I had to redesign, and ask myself some big questions like, well, okay, if I have this totally new opportunity here to build a life over again after I picked myself off the floor, because I always say that I was like a dumpster fire of a human for a while. It was a total mess and grief. Yeah. And I came to my senses a little bit at a time. And I said, what do I really want this to look like? And so one of the things that I went back to was this idea of leadership development and how I'm a total nerd. Like I'm the person who sits in the front row at the conferences. Like I'm that girl. Like I'm just a total nerd about it. And so I said, okay, if I'm going to do something that I love, I need to go put myself back in the seat, because I had taught leaders. I trained leaders for over a decade at that point, maybe more. But I'd never been through a proper leadership development course myself. So I said, it's time for me to do that. And I was lucky enough to be in a job where they sponsored me to do that. About halfway through that process, there was a woman who came in. She's an executive coach and PhD from Yale, highly accomplished, super smart, really inspiring. And I kind of tugged on her coattails after class, and I was like, excuse me? I really think you're cool. Could we talk about what you do? And she's like, oh, interested. Yes, I think she knew me a little bit. And she said, oh, that's cool. Yeah, let's talk about it. This makes a lot of sense for you, I think. And so she very graciously accepted my offer to come out to go for coffee. I took her out on a coffee date. Mm-hmm. And she talked to me a little bit about how that could work. And I said to her, well, I've never been an executive of a Fortune 500 company. How would I know how to work with them? And how to teach them, actually, is what I said. Yeah. And she said, you're not teaching them, you're coaching them. You don't have to learn how to be them. You have to learn how to coach them. And here are some ways to do that. So that led me to finding IPEC, the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, where I went to got my training, because I did a search for the Harvard of coach trainings, because I'm a high achiever and, have a bit of an ego. And I wanted to go do the best thing. And I found IPEC, and it was an incredibly profound, life-changing, soul-fulfilling experience to go through that coach training. It was not easy. It was long. It was a lot of work, a lot of hours. And it's such a gift. It was such a gift in my life. And I felt like from 5 minutes in to my first session training with them, I realized that I had found my people and I was home. And I was 42? How old? Yeah, 41, 42. So it was totally a profound, transformative experience.
Wow.
And then so you asked about the business of coaching. So then from then on, I was in this job and I was doing some business consulting and for artists who were getting grants and building their projects around these grants they were building. And I started realizing that I had some acumen there. And then it occurred to me that maybe I could go take my show on the road. And I asked my boss initially, I'm like, what would you think about me coaching some of these clients? And she said, no, I don't think we really want to do that. And I said, okay, well then I think I got to go. And she goes, great, good luck. And so they sent me on my way and I started my business in earnest. Well, I started in July of 2018. And then 2019, January 1, I had completed my job and had taken a couple clients, with their blessing, because they didn't do it. So it was a conflict, and started coaching these artists who were building organizations, and then just kept kind of putting my flag out there and saying, hey, anybody want coaching? Who wants to do this thing? So over time, I've developed my focus of this entrepreneurial founder who is transforming from the doer to the leader. And that's really kind of the niche that I fill right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it strikes me that the whole way through there's been this through line of intentionality. You talked about rebuilding your life and thinking about what's my purpose. And it strikes me that it must be so helpful for someone to have coaching from someone who is so intentional as you're able to really help them focus in on building that intentionality in their lives and their work. So I can see the path through there really nicely.
And because I wasn't before. So I understand the difference. I understand that it's one thing to go through your life and just kind of do it as you think you're supposed to do, or being reactive to circumstances, being in a victim mindset. That is to say, not capital V accusational, like you're a victim, but in the sense of like I don't have any control or agency in my life, to understanding that I do have control and agency over myself.
Yes.
And that shift is profound. I'm seeing it right now I've seen it in two of my kids. One of them's going through it right now. The other one happened in his junior year in high school, and now he's a first year in college. And one kid in particular right now is really struggling, and we keep saying this to him over and over again, like, if you want different outcomes, you need to you're in control of the outcome here. Mm-hmm. And he's starting to get it. It's the same thing but as adults to have the same frustrations. It's a different application. There are different circumstances, different stressors, but it's the same question. I feel out of control,
Yeah, no, it's funny because I hadn't seen it in quite that light until you said it just now. But my younger daughter has been dealing with this friend issue. She's in 4th grade, so pretty young. And I've been really surprised at how maturely she's been handling this. And she is very mature for her age, but also just watching her deal with this issue. And it's a conflict between her and a friend. They've been friends for a while. She doesn't feel like she's been treated well by this friend, and with good reason. And we've talked with her about it, and it's legit. She has real valid complaints about it. But the way that she's handled it, and the way that she sees her agency in this whole thing, it was amazing to me. She came home and was talking about how this friend wants to work things out, wants to talk, keeps coming to her and saying, hey, can we be friends again? But she's not doing the things that make my daughter want to be friends. And my daughter's response is basically, no, I don't want to work this out. I don't want to be friends right now. And so I was sort of helping her find the words to say that, but the agency was there. And it's honestly so much younger than I ever developed that. It was awesome.
Way younger than I did, that's for sure.
Yeah.
One thing that I always think kind of the difference between there's many differences between kids and adults. But one of them is, I think for kids, especially in elementary and grade school, there's kind of a defined path. You go off that path every now and then, but like after 3rd grade is 4th grade for most students.
Right.
Where for adults, it's meandering. Who the heck knows? Life is not linear.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find, in coaching, folks just want answers. They don't want
Right.
questions or they're like, no, don't give me a framework for how to think about this. Freaking tell me, should I go left or right?
It'd be so much easier if you could just
How do you
answer
handle
this
those?
for me.
It's so much easier if we were just like, oh, go left here. How do you handle those cases where people may even push back and think like, you're not doing a good job as a coach because you're not giving me the answer?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so the International Coaching Federation, which has sponsored my accreditation, my certification, is very clear on this. That there are many different kinds of support, right? There's advice, there's counseling, there's therapy, there's consulting, there's spiritual guidance, there is a friend or a parent, and then there's coaching in the context of interpersonal coaching. And so in that context, we don't give advice. Our job is very specifically to offer a process that allows for insight and connection so the person in front of us can develop their own strategy with the feedback of the coach. Let us say feedback saying, have you, what about this thing? You said this before. How does that play into this, right? Feedback means they're reflecting it back to them. And then using some tools and strategies around making plans and staying accountable. So if someone says to me, why don't you just tell me what to do? I'll usually, first of all, it's in my agreement that I don't give advice. So I'll say, did you read your agreement? And I usually have a pretty playful relationship with my clients. Oftentimes, I've come to a client agreement or relationship through a personal relationship first, or a referral from a personal relationship, in which case I'll play with them a little bit first and say, we say something silly. And then I might ask a question like, what's important about my opinion? And then,
Wow.
yeah, and right. And then they go, oh, well, I guess I care what you think. Okay. Well, am I having impact on your business directly? Well, no. Okay. So whose opinion is really important here? Mine and my team's, right? Okay. Then how do we get the best outcome based on your own process and or the process of your team? And I'll just redirect it that way. Sometimes people will ask me, I know you're not supposed to give advice, but
But just this once.
But or they'll say, but I'm interested in your opinion. And then I might, depending on the relationship, I might say, what's important in my opinion, or what about my opinion is meaningful to you. And then sometimes I might say, based on my experience of you, my opinion is blank, and that's only because I know about you that this and that and the other is important to you. So I really don't really give my opinion.
Yeah, of course.
I'm just framing it that way so they hear it that way, because to your point, sometimes people are usually told what to do, but really it's not my opinion. It's I'm just using that a word and really just offering another reflection.
That's so interesting.
That one question must really disarm people.
Have you ever had anyone really push back on that? That like, no, I really just don't know what to do. Tell me what to do.
I haven't in my practice, because I'm so clear about that from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And I'm so clear about what coaching is and how I approach it and how the industry standard approaches it. I definitely have people when I was consulting and when I was facilitating push back on me hard about that stuff.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the skills in the same way that I do now. And so it's an easy trap to fall into, because you just want to help, right?
Yeah.
You just want to relieve somebody's pain. You want to help them get out of their own crap. You want to, right?
Yeah.
And again, teaching versus coaching, very different. If I'm training, and that's a different modality too, right? If I'm training and I have some specific information to impart to somebody, and I have experience with that information based on my expertise in the field, based on my anecdotal experience, I might offer an example. Not as here's what you should do, but here's one way to look at it. But I'm very, very clear about not giving advice. That's not my role.
Yeah, it sounds very boundaried work.
You have to be.
No, you don't cross that line. This really is you figuring things out, and I'm here to help.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
So frustrating. Why can't you just give me the answer?
Joe's still on that.
Well, then I might explore if it really gets put, and it typically doesn't, but for me, because I'm working with people who make big decisions all the time, right? So they're usually used to that, and they'll get, okay, fine. But I don't want to make the decision. But you have to. Okay, fine. Right? That's but usually as far as it goes. But then I might explore in that case, what about this situation is making you want to get out of the discomfort? What's uncomfortable about this for you? Because clearly you want to get out of discomfort. You just want the easy way out. You want to ask my opinion. That's easy. And it's probably not right because I'm not you.
Yeah.
So what about this is uncomfortable, and what can we learn about this or about yourself so that we can help you move through it?
Yeah, again, it just strikes me how psychologically minded this is. And I've never studied coaching. I've been coached, but I've never studied it. But the work, the way that you think about the work feels very much the way that I think my wife would think about working with someone who would ask the same thing. How do I handle the situation, or how do I think about this relationship, or whatever? And the point is not what I think about it. The point is, what do you think about it? Like you said, if they're really pushing on it, and it's Joe and he's coming back and going, no, answer my question.
Right.
That bears investigation. Why is it so important that I give you an answer here? Why aren't you able to figure that out? And it's turning it. It sounds kind of bad saying it this way, but it's turning the question back around on them and saying, like, no, let's really investigate this. Why is this something that you need me to answer?
Yeah.
Because that clearly is important in this situation.
Because it's probably
Why
a
is that
pattern.
so important?
It's probably a
Right.
pattern, and it's probably showing up in lots of other areas. If I'm deflecting or avoiding making a decision, or if I'm avoiding looking at something, there's probably something that I'm specifically avoiding in other areas too, and it's probably having a bigger impact in my life than I realize.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The other thing about it being similar to, and it's certainly not a replacement for therapy at all. Its current contemporary iteration has a lot of foundational work in cognitive behavioral therapy. So yes, there are some connections there. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So you've mentioned powerful questions multiple times now, and I've been dying to get to it, but I wanted to get some of this background first. But when you talk about powerful questions, what does that mean, and why are they important in coaching, in life, in the way that people think about conducting intentional leadership practices?
So there's two parts to that question. One part I mentioned before about being defensive, right? So the question why is often going to put people on the defense immediately because it feels like an accusation. It feels like I have to defend my position. Even so, again, it depends on how you deliver it and what the intention is. So one way to avoid or kind of circumnavigate that defensiveness immediately is to ask what and how questions. So when you ask, just if you play the tape back, just give me the answer. I didn't say, why is my opinion important to you? I don't think. If I did, I shouldn't have. What I should have said was, or hopefully what I did say was, what about my opinion is important to you? And then it makes them want to solve the problem rather than get defensive and protecting their position. There's a great book called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, which is, and he was an FBI negotiator, and he talks about this a lot. Like when you're negotiating with people who are holding hostages, right? To get them, keep asking questions where they have to consider problems because it keeps them talking and it keeps giving you information. It's the same thing. And I make the joke that, like, when I'm talking to my kid, he's got his brain is holding him hostage in his head because he's 15 and that's what hormones do. They hold us hostage, right? So I have to think about that when my kid is like giving me a lot of attitude or defending his position. And I want to ask, why are you doing that? Or, what's your motivation behind making this ridiculous decision? Whatever, my judgment comes out, my frustration comes out. I have to stop and think, if I'm actually going to get a real answer here, I have to start asking him, what about this is important to you? What went into making that decision? Because sometimes my instinct is to want to like snap out of it, but
Seriously.
So
Stop it.
Which usually doesn't work with a teenager.
Yeah, right. And then when I'm when I'm solving a problem, then I'm part of the solution. Then I'm no longer out of control, but I'm part of gaining control. I've gained control, right? So if I might ask you, to your point, why won't you? Can't you just give me the answer? Well, then I'm abdicating control. I'm giving up control to you in my life. I'm saying, just give me the answer. Okay, but if I ask you, what about this scenario, or what do you think about X scenario? Or you mentioned this before, what do you think about following through on that thought or that idea? Then all of a sudden I've gained control again. I've become an agent in my own life rather than just giving it up.
Interesting. And you've talked about I think this is what you're kind of getting into, the neuroscience behind asking powerful questions. Mm-hmm. Is that what you mean when you talk about that, the way that the brain responds, or was there more to it than that?
Yeah, well, yes, and there is more to it than that. I mean, we can talk about thoughts and like beliefs, and then beliefs informing feelings and emotions, and emotions informing actions or lack of action. So the simple example I like to give about this is, most of us who have any sort of attention, cognitive attention disordered thinking, whether it's genetic or whether it's learned or whether it's because I'm on my phone all the time and I'm just distractible. Wait, I mean, if you look at my desk now, you would see a couple of piles of paper and you would see some Post-its, right? And that's why I only have this screen here as opposed to the whole desk.
Yeah, of course.
Right. So if I have that pile of paper and it's got some bills and it's got some notes and it's got some things I need to attend to, and if that pile of paper is not attended to over a few days or a week or two, now I'm losing control. That is to say, I'm losing agency. I don't mean control over, but I'm losing the sense of agency. Right now, the paper's got the agency, the control. It's got the power in the situation. And then I'm going to start avoiding it more. So that's which is actually an action. It might be, it looks like inaction. It might even look like, quote, laziness, end quote, which is a judgment about inaction. But the action or lack of action, the action is to not take action, which then guess what? Reinforces the belief that the pile of paper has power over me, which then perpetuates the emotion of, oh my gosh, I can't handle this. I'm like, right? And now the pile of paper's a foot tall. And I haven't paid my bills, and I haven't paid my taxes in 3 years. And I mean, it sounds funny, but like that's essentially one version of how the neuroscience of decision making works. So coaching might then look like, what about that pile of paper has got you so avoidant? What's so scary about it? Well, gosh, I mean,
not why are you not dealing with it, but what's
so scary about it? Right. Because why aren't you dealing with that pile of paper? Even if you say, "Gosh, why aren't you dealing with that pile of paper?" It still sounds like there's a internal judgment about it. I'm judging myself.
Dealt with it,
right? I'm already judging myself about it. And of course, if I'm judging myself, then I'm going to hear judgment in everybody else who talks about it with me.
Of course.
So, but if I ask, "What about that is scary?" Oh, well, you know what? Or it could even be, I don't even know why I'm not dealing with it. It's just this giant pile of paper. I don't know why I'm not dealing with it. Well, okay. So how is that showing up as a problem for you? Well, I just got my lights turned off. Okay.
There's a problem.
All right.
How does that feel? I feel overwhelmed and I feel frustrated and I'm embarrassed. Okay. What's embarrassing about that pile of paper? Well, you know what? I really feel I'm ashamed and I feel like I'm overwhelmed and maybe I feel like I don't have the money to pay for it and I just don't want to look at my bank account. So money is really stressful for you. Yeah. Now we're getting somewhere. Right? Now I'm starting to get to the heart of this. Okay. So if money is stressful for you, then what would make you feel less stressed or maybe more in control of this? Well, maybe if I paid one bill. Okay, great. What would you like to do about that? Okay, well, maybe if I'll pay one bill, then I can take at least one piece of paper off that pile and I can maybe get my lights back on because I know I have enough to pay my lighting bill. Fantastic. Look at that. You're already solving problems. Now I look at that pile of paper and I go, maybe I can solve a little bit more of it today. Maybe I can have a little bit more success. And maybe I can spend 15 minutes a day or 15 minutes a week dealing with that pile of papers.
You break the inertia of not doing anything.
Exactly. And then I take action. And then I feel more successful. I feel like I've got more agency. I've got more power. And then I use that momentum in other areas of my life.
And so the work that you're doing, that's really interesting to think about it that way. The work that you're doing, I assume, is probably not people who have had their lights turned off, but it's people who are not dealing with problems that they know that they should deal with, or have challenges that for whatever reason they're resistant to addressing or something like that. And so the work that, what you just described, that sort of thought process of working that through, it's this sort of non-judgmental, but sort of refocusing the questions to keep asking these questions and dig into the responses, but in a way that's not, well, why didn't you do that? Why didn't you choose that? Why haven't you dealt with this problem employee who's costing your business money?
Oh, that's a big one.
Seriously.
That one
Right?
comes up a lot. Yep.
It's not usually the lights turned off, but it's often the employee issues.
But occasionally it is some version of the lights have turned off because my attention's been elsewhere as the client,
And
right? So
we're not getting things done. We're losing money.
or my license to practice whatever thing I'm practicing is expired. Oops. That's a big one. And that's
God,
and,
so
and normally, I mean, normally that's not something that happens very often, and it's usually something that's they've caught it so within a grace period. It's not a big deal, like because these people again are running multi-million-dollar businesses, so it's not like their eyes are off that ball that long. But sometimes things like that happen, and that's why grace periods exist, of course, because of that. But that kind of stuff does happen. Oh my gosh, I was so concerned with this fire I was putting out that I forgot to take care of the lighting bill, right? Or the proverbial lighting bill. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, but I love that little distinction of don't ask why, ask what or how. And so when you think about powerful questions, that's sort of the root of it, right? It's digging into the situation, but sort of helping them to dig into it from their perspective.
Yeah.
Is that a good way to describe it?
Yes, and in the background, anytime we're avoiding something or we're feeling stressed about it, we feel like we don't have agency.
Yeah.
So by asking what or how, we are giving them an opportunity to create agency for themselves. And that's something that is going to be applicable in every aspect of their life where they don't feel like they have power or control. And again, not power over. I'm not saying that they're controlling everything. They're to create the strong grip. But what I mean is where I can have influence, where I can have impact.
Yeah. Well, I love the example of the piles of paper because I don't have them on my desk, but I do have them in other parts of the house.
Next to the front door, in the kitchen.
Next to the front
right.
door.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. As I'm thinking about, well, why do I have those piles of paper? There's some of it that's just I haven't had the time to deal with it. And if we were in a coaching session, it would be, well, I need to deal with this. I know I need to deal with this, but I haven't had the time in the last few days. But then the next question is, well, what is it about the other things you're doing that are more important? Or what is it about this that makes it feel less important or something like that? And if I really investigate that, I kind of go, yeah, I really should just go do that.
Mm-hmm. Or where else is this pattern showing up in your life?
Yeah. What else am I avoiding? Yeah. But as the coach, asking if you were to say to me, okay, so I understand you haven't filed those things that you've piled up in the little nook by the front door. Where else is that happening? Or why haven't you done that somewhere else in your life? That's a very different experience than me going, oh, wait a second. Okay, I haven't dealt with this thing. I also haven't dealt with this thing. And I can see the connection. I can see why I'm feeling this. Okay, wait, now, okay, I really need to do that. And it is just energizing in a way, as opposed to the sort of drain of having someone ask you, well, how come you haven't done it?
Yeah. Right. It's the same thing, when we're teaching little kids to clean up their rooms, right? And we say to the 5-year-old, go clean up your room. And the 5-year-old hasn't learned how to do that yet.
Where do I even start?
Right.
Yeah.
And they just get overwhelmed and they're like, well, I don't know. So they don't do, what do? They go play Legos or they go do something else, right? They avoid it. But if you walk your 5-year-old through the process of cleaning their room, well, where does this go? What would you do with that? Where does this want to live? Where does, Mr. Bunny want to go? Then all of a sudden that child has created their own strategy. And when it's next time, maybe not very, very next time, but hopefully over a few times when they get that routine, they say, go clean your room. Great. It takes them 10 minutes or 5 minutes because they know they've created the strategy of where everything goes.
Yeah.
Beyond just starting with those words of how or what instead of why, how does somebody start to become better at asking powerful questions? What are the kinds of questions? What are the ways of thinking about this? And I think we've seen some of this in just the way that you've described this today, in the way that you described the experience of coaching. But if you can sort of distill that into the practice and how somebody would want to think about this, how would you guide them on that?
That's a big question, and I think it's a really important one. In my client space, so I work with entrepreneurs who are the founders or primary decision makers in their business. They're the one who is used to delivering the widget or the service. They've either built it, they designed it, or they're the one who's like me, like they're trained in something. And then they have a business over time that is scaling to $2 to $10 million in annual revenue. So they have success, they have experience, and now they're building a team, right? Or they have built a team and they don't know how to run that team. So I give that context because often one of the major, the primary issues or stumbling blocks they have is, why won't they just do it the way I tell them to do it? Right?
Yeah, sure.
And even though they don't all really want to come at it differently, that's their primary frustration around their relationships is, why don't they see it the way I said? I can't just do it the way I do it. Well, they can't do it the way you do it because they're not you, right? They're not the one who has the talent for this thing that started this business. If they were, they would have started their own, right? So, and I don't mean that in a finger wagging way, but it's often something that like people get very frustrated about, because when we have a talent, any talent that anybody has, they think of it as easy. So they think of it, oh, doesn't everybody do this? So if we can frame it in a way of cultivating one way that I do it is, what do you want from this company? Do you want to be working in this company forever? Look at it from the perspective of legacy. That if you are going to have a legacy of this company, then you're eventually going to want to be out of this company. One way or another, you're going to have to be. How do they carry on your legacy without you? What do you want to stick? Yeah. And then we start solving for those problems. So asking questions that have, and it's tough. It's really tough because when you're frustrated, then we're very focused on how I feel. If I'm frustrated, okay, understandably so. It's very frustrating. And so there's another thing right there, validating somebody's concern, right? Everybody wants to be validated. So yeah, it's definitely frustrating. And in order to achieve X goal, how do we solve for that goal? So yeah, solving that or validating the concern first is one way to dissipate the energy and get someone to kind of calm down a little bit. Not saying I understand necessarily, but it's understandable. And then but knowing that you have this goal, how do you want to proceed with that?
And I imagine it goes back to a lot of what you've said about being present and really listening and sort of leading with, I don't know if I'll be able to say it right. Maybe you can say it better, but sort of leading with what the other person needs at that moment, as opposed to what you think. And this is what I've taken from this conversation, at least, that the important thing in whether it's coaching, leadership, whatever it is, but asking those powerful questions is really understanding, sort of seeing the other person's situation, understanding what they're telling you, but then not giving them the answer and helping guide them to it by asking those questions that not lead someone to it, but allow them to illuminate the things that they're trying to figure out.
And it might be somewhat leading if you're coaching from a leadership position, because you want to, there are certain goals that you have as an organization you want to accomplish together, right? So then it might be, how can we work together to accomplish these goals? And then you're asking, kind of draw them out, their skills and gifts.
Well, Merritt, thank you for sharing all this. It was so interesting to hear about the process and the way that you think about coaching, especially the boundaries that you really set, that there's so much of it that's you asking questions and not telling. And the distinction I think that you made between coaching and teaching is a really important one that I'm not sure people are fully aware of if they've not experienced great coaching. But it's been really interesting for me to hear the parallels between this and teaching and this and psychology and this in parenting and just the informed way that you come to this practice and how you approach it. It's just been really, really cool to learn about. So thank you so much for sharing this with us.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much, both of you, for having me. It's totally a joy, and I appreciate you letting me nerd out about my favorite topics.
We're all about nerding out.
Woohoo!
So, folks, thank you for joining. We'll drop Merritt's website in the episode notes. We'll put some resources in there on coaching and other things that she'll send us. And for now, that's all we've got. Thanks so much for joining, and always keep learning. Did you learn something just now? Get the full episode of Ways We Learn wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, we'd love to get your rating or review.